So I will start introducing Alice Allen, who is giving a talk on opening the computational box, software sharing, and the ASCL. Alice's academic background is in medical sciences. She has been editor of the Astrophysics source code library since 2010. Alice worked in IT her entire career, and she retired from the Federal Reserve Board in 2017, where she worked for the Division of Information Technology for 22 years. Now she's spending more time on astronomy, scientific software, and various other activities. So welcome, Alice, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm also managing to goof off some, I'll admit, in my retirement. So let me share my screen. And is that good?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much for that introduction and for inviting me to speak today. I love talking about open science and open astronomy and astronomy in general, and sometimes cats too. My slides are available online. I've put a link in the Slack channel, and you're free to share the contents of the slides. Please also post any questions that you have to the Slack channel, and I'll try to answer some as they're posted if I learn about them, and then others after the presentation. So I'm here to talk about what the ASCL is, how it promotes and supports reproducibility in open science, and what you can do to share your own research software effectively to increase the reproducibility and transparency of your work. Oh, good, that worked. Okay, so the ASCL is a registry of codes used in research. It can serve as a repository, and in fact, when the ASCL was started in 1999, so last century, it was only a repository. It required deposit of the software in order to include it in the resource. But that requirement inhibited the growth of the ASCL, so that was dropped in 2010, so we could grow the ASCL more quickly. And now what we do is mostly point to where the software that we register is available for download, but we still do accept deposits to the ASCL and serve those codes to the public ourselves. ASCL is also indexed by ADS, Web of Science, and other indexers. The driving reason for the Astrophysics Source Code Library, or ASCL, is transparency. We want to make the research recognized and make the codes that are used in research more easily found so they can be examined. We have two main criteria for what we register. We register codes used in refereed articles or articles submitted for refereeing or accepted PhD theses. As Chris Lintott mentioned yesterday, the acceptance rate for research papers in astronomy is extremely high. He said about 85% across the society-owned, the largest society-owned journals. But for all astronomy journals, it's over 90%. So we feel secure in admitting codes, registering codes that are used in articles that have just been submitted for refereeing, because we're pretty sure those papers will be published. So that's the first criterion. The code has to be used in refereed research, and the source code has to be available for download without barriers. None of this available upon reasonable request or anything like that. So we codes and publish the entries online. The ASCL editors create entries themselves. There are 3 of us who edit the resource. I'm the editor-in-chief, but we also have Kimberly Dupree and Catherine Gossmeyer working on the ASCL as editors. We go through papers looking for computational methods, and when we find ones that we don't have, that meet all of our criteria, we register them in the ASCL. We create the entries for them, publish them online. But we actually really prefer and software authors and users because we're not going to find all the software, just the three of us by ourselves. We're not going to find all the software out there, and you may have code that we don't even know about. And also software authors and users typically know the software better than we're going to know it. So they write better descriptions. So what do you get when you register your code in the ASCL? For one, you get a unique identifier, the ASCL ID. This is a recognized identifier. It's registered with identifiers.org, and Index can pick up citations to the ASCL if the citation includes the ASCL ID. So the whole ID needs to appear for the citation. So you get a unique identifier for it. Notice that the ASCL record also includes links to papers in which the code is described and or used in. This particular entry has only used in. There's no code description paper for this particular software package. That's important because ADS picks that information. You also get a record in ADS for your software. You also get a record in other indexers, but I'm concentrating on ADS because we all use it. So, but ASCL information also appears in Web of Science, Google Scholar, etc. And indeed, if you Google for just a regular Google search for astronomy software, you will pull up ASCL entries. So you get a record in ADS, and this record include citations. When the citations are by the ASCL ID, use the ASCL ID, ADS can track those. So that shows up in the record. It's a trackable citation method. We're not saying that's the only way or the best, necessarily even the best way to cite software. And I'm happy with software cited well, no matter what it is. So it doesn't have to be the ASCL record, just as long as it's cited. You'll see that the links to papers that use this particular code that our code is used in show up under related materials. So if we were to click on one of those links, we would get a link we would see the paper entry in ADS, and notice that it also links to the source code, to the ASCL entry. And you also, registering your code in the ASCL also makes your code more discoverable. It increases the discoverability of the code because you can search for it not only in Google Scholar, but more particularly in ADS and other indexers as well. But in ADS, you can use the doc type software, the software doc type to pull up just software records in ADS, and then some other field, such as the full text field for, in this case, fast radio burst, and that pulled up FRB stats. So increased discoverability and searchability, that was one of the points that Chris Erdman brought up yesterday, that sometimes software behind. We're trying to make it easier to find. The ASCL promotes and supports reproducibility and open science through its different activities. We actively ask software authors whether their code is open, and we don't register it unless it is. We encourage authors to license their software. You heard yesterday how important licensing is. If software isn't licensed, people don't know whether they can use it, whether they can copy it, whether they have any rights at all. So it's extremely important to attach a license to your software. We also encourage authors to explicitly state their preferred citation method. Just including a badge on a repo with the DOI on it is not specifying your preferred citation method. So we want authors to say, cite this code this way, use this entity, whatever it is, use this research object, whether it's a software or a paper or something, to cite this software package. We recommend that they try methods. We want to explicitly state their preferred citation method. We also educate people through conferences, presentations, and correspondence on what what trackable and non-trackable citation methods are, and the difference between acknowledgement and citation. We curate our records, and most people are most interested in whether we curate our site links. We do curate our site links to ensure people can find the software that we register, even if it's moved. We report the health links or dashboard. If you go to ascl.net, you'll see that there's a dashboard link, and at the very top of that, you can find out how healthy our links are for the site links. We also push code download sites, not GitHub repos, because Software Heritage picked those up. But if you have your software on an HTML page, for example, that at your institution, we push that page. When we come across it, we push that page to the Internet Archive. I'll download the code that we register. So we have this huge archive. Well, okay, not so hard, not so huge, but 2,700 packages, 2,700 different software packages. So we have an archive of almost every code that we register. And we do this is most useful for when software authors have lost their software, which does happen. When Bitbucket, for example, ended support for Curial repos, some software authors who had their code there lost their code. They did not have another copy of it. And several of them contacted us or lamented openly in Twitter, and then we let them know via Twitter, we have their code and we're happy to send it back to them, and did. Sometimes a whole website will disappear, and often we have downloaded the entire website, so can send that back to authors as well. We don't serve, we've been a particular software package unless we have specific permission from the author to do that. We don't want to mess with people's intellectual property. So that's why we link to software more than store it ourselves, but we do store it if people want us to. All of our data, which is metadata about software, is available for download. There is a link to it on the page, to a link to download all of our metadata in JSON. We perform research on software because we want to know how we can do things better and whether we're having any effect on behavior and the field in general. And I'll talk about a couple of our little research projects in a minute. And then we also work in collaboration with other groups, with other people in astronomy and across disciplines in organizations such as the Force 11 group, and then a new consortium that we've started called SciCodes, which is for registries and repositories for discipline-specific software. So things like the ASCL, but in other disciplines. So one of our research projects was to ask the question, what we wanted to know was what percentage of software used in research is available to others as source code. It's not until you really open the box, available or not. So we opened that box, we searched a set of astrophysics research articles published in 2015 for software use. We then determined whether the source code was available for download. So that to us was live code, source available, open to examination. And what we found was that in looking at these, looking through papers for computational methods, we could not identify the computational method that was clearly used in the paper 42% of the time. 42% of the instances of some computation took place. That's kind of scary that we can't do that. But of the software we could identify, we found that source code was not available for 40% of it. So the good news is that identifiable software was available as source code in 60% of the software that was used. So we were happy about that, but some of these other numbers are a little scary. We also tested links. We extracted links in all the same 2015 papers. And we did this because such links often point to important resources for the paper, such as software and data. We removed links that were added by the publishing process. The publishing process adds a lot of links to papers. So we removed all of those. We removed any that were malformed, that were mail tos, et cetera. And we tested the 2,500 links remaining. And we found that almost 11% of all the links were unreachable. We did this work for papers published in 2015. So some of these papers were not even 2 years old. We're not surprised. We were not surprised at all to find that link rot happens, but we were surprised a little bit at how quickly it happens. We reran the same links a year later, and so in 2018, and then we reran the link checking again last year. And we found that, of course, link rot continued to a scary degree. So almost 13% of all links were unreachable in 2018, and 20% of the links failed last year. I did not have the heart to rerun the analysis this year. So I might wait a couple more years and fortify myself before I do that. But so that's 3 problems that we found that directly relate to the availability of software. Software is hidden. We don't know what the computational method is at all. We can't identify it. We just know that it took place because the paper says we did X, but they don't say with what. The source code is often not available, and links to resources that are important to the paper, typically software or data, increasingly fail over time. We've also experimented with how to encourage researchers to provide citation information for their software. We list preferred citation information right in the entry, right in the ASCL entry when we know what it is. We looked at how many codes added to the ASCL in 2020 specify a citation method. We even sent authors the put on their software download site. For example, we sent them both citation.cff files, which you heard about yesterday, and we also sent codemeta.json files. So these were custom crafted to that particular software package. These are fully editable files. We generated and sent those to code authors when we let them know that we've registered their code, and suggested that they put one of these on their repos. And then in January of last year, in 2021, we looked to see how many of them had added. Is pretty depressed. Only 3% of the codes added to the ASCL in 2020 specified a preferred citation, and our efforts in sending citation files did not increase the number. There was almost no uptake of the files that we sent out. So that was a little discouraging. But there have been lots of changes in astronomy and science, in astronomy and in science in general, that affect how software authors can share their software, can share their changes in the community resources. There are new services that have come along in the past dozen years or so since I've been working on the ASCL, including collaborative coding sites such as Bitbucket and GitLab, archival resources such as Software Heritage and Zenodo. Existing services like the ASCL have been given new life and are growing, and Archive and ADS have both improved their support for linking code to research and research to code. So software and information about software. Indexers are also able to now capture software citation. So software citation is captured, tracked, and counted by indexers such as Web of Science and ADS and Google Scholar. So that's good. And then there are broader efforts across disciplines such as Force 11. I participate in its software citation implementation working group, for example, SciCodes, which I've already mentioned, different things that cross disciplines such as citation.cff and all. So sharing ideas and new tooling and all that influence not just those involved in these efforts, but can also influence publishers, funders, and institutions, in addition to individual authors. So we heard yesterday about the changes to existing journals. That was in Chris's talk. So I'm going to just say, yes, that we met first with ASCL in 2013, trying to encourage them to improve their software citation, well, trying to get them to say, yes, software could be cited. And then they did change the policy. All journals now support software citation. And Chris also mentioned a couple of new journals that have been developed, such as the Journal of Open Source Software, or JOSS, and the research notes of the AAS. There are others, astronomy, and that you can, if you're so inclined, submit a description paper to. And the Software X journal does do peer review of the software on their site, and they do peer review of it. So there's a lot out there. There are better ways to cite software explicitly. So with the new journals, policies, indexers, and tools, but these systems can also be tracked. And new tools are also being developed to leverage this, such as citeas.org, CFF-init, which is for the citation.cff file, code meta generator, all of that. You can also use the ASCL to generate either a citation.cff or a code meta file. So these and there are new efforts and workflows that improve software citation in general. One of them is the Ascl product. So I said I would tell you what you could do to share your codes effectively. Some of this you've already heard, but here's your handy checklist. The first is to release your software with a license. Again, the license is what lets other people know what they can and cannot do with your software. Specify a citation method and make it explicit and make it easy to find. It should be, in my opinion, on the home page for your software or in the root directory of your repo. If like GitHub. Register your code with the ASCL so that it is more discoverable, so that information about your software can flow into ADS and Google Scholar and Web of Science, etc. Archive your code so that in 20 years, when somebody wants to examine the fabulous work you're doing now, they have a way to see what computational methods you used. So archive your code to preserve the research record, to support the research record. Cite your own. I'm sorry that I actually have to put this in there, but I've come across many papers when looking at them in which new software was developed for the research for the research that the paper describes, but the author did not cite his or her own code in the bibliography. Don't do that. Please cite your own codes well. That you deserve. Your code deserves to be cited if you're using it in your research, even if it's in the first doing. Archive, you can send it to Zenodo, you can submit it to the ASCL before you submit the paper or when you submit the paper, and to get something to get an identifier that's recognized. So do that. Of course, cite other people's codes well as well. We list preferred citation method for our entries when we know what they are on the ASCL to make it easier for people to cite code. Often what we have is a link to ADA at the BibTeX for citation. We have citation information on only 55 on only, sorry, 45% of our entries because it doesn't exist for the other 55%. We've gone out and looked for it and we can't find it. So, you know, that goes back to specifying your citation method. Please do that. Also, include a software section in articles. This came up yesterday as well. And this is very, very convenient, not only for the reader of your paper, but also for bibliographers, for people interested in software in general, for people who, for ASCL and others who want to work with software and learn more about it. So that's the checklist I have for you. And thank you. I said I'd do this in 25 minutes and I did. So thank you. And I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much, Alice.
Is it okay if I stop sharing now?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay.
So, well, I don't see any questions from the audience in Slack, so please don't be shy and ask questions there. Meanwhile, I would like to ask you one question. So I understand we need to do a better job on reflecting in publications the software we are using, right? But I think this is a matter also on training and educating people, in my view. So are there any actions or near future plans to do that on our community?
For training?
Yes.
Well, one of the things we do every time we send a software author, whenever we register software, we send the author of the software an email and we ask them, we say, please license your code if you haven't already. And lots of times they already have, but because GitHub has that built in where you assign, it asks you to assign a license. But we try to educate with every email that we send. We say, license your software how you want it cited. So we do try to encourage that, but we actively encourage that. We also speak at conferences and hold groups, hold sessions in different places where we talk about software citation and the importance of citing it. And we make the citation method, we educate people as to what is a trackable citation method and what is not. Links to GitHub repos, those are not a good citation method. They do not belong in the bibliography. You should use something with an ID that is registered somewhere, or that is recognized and can be tracked by things like ADS and Web of Science. I love to see URLs. You know, we use this software and there's a footnote. That's fabulous. That's great for the paper. That gives people immediate access so they can see your computation. Don't put in the bibliography. So yeah, we do sessions on this regularly at different conferences such as ADAS, AAS, and we've done them at EAS, what is now EAS, right? The EAS conference. So
thank you.
I see James has a question. Please describe the software section in an article. It's a dedicated part of the paper saying we use this software. This is something that that appears in some double particular because they started asking people to put a software section in their their author guidelines suggest this. It just says
12 hours.
Here's a list of, that's my computer, sorry, telling me the time. Here's a list of the software we used. And that's very useful. Janet said the poor feedback on citations if the right paper for a project is the person associated with the software package. Well, can the person be checked changed? Yeah. We're writing to the person who is listed as the the person who owns the repo, for example. So that is the right person for the project because they own the repo. But if there's somebody else that we should be corresponding with, sure, that can certainly be changed. I think one of the problems with the way that we did these preferred citations by sending out the citation.cff and code meta files is that it was too much information in one. So we need maybe to do something a little bit more targeted. And one approach that has worked, although we haven't done it, other people have, is to actually do a pull request to say, pull this file into your repo, edit it and pull it in. So that would probably work. And the fact that citation.cff is now integrated or can be easily generated from GitHub itself. You saw the graph yesterday in Chris Erdman's talk, I guess, about how quickly an explosion really of people using citation.cff files, because that's now integrated into Zotero and also GitHub. So that definitely helps. But still, 55% of our entries do not list preferred citation method because that's not available on the code sites. We can't find it. So yeah. So code does get cited. I mean, there are lots of citations to ASCL, almost 10,000, I think. If you look, let's see, I don't know, does our dashboard show that? Yeah, there are over 9,000 citations to ASCL entries in ADS, and the ASCL is not the only way that software gets cited. So software is being cited. So, okay, I'm over time now, sorry.
Okay, no problem. So I don't see more questions. Thank you very much, Alice, for your talk.